Under the golden breath of dawn, when the first light spilled over the vast plateaus of ancient Persia, the world shimmered with the promise of water. Rivers carved their silver paths through the thirsty lands, whispering secrets to the wind. The air carried the scent of rain long awaited, mingling with the dry perfume of sand and myrrh. And amid that eternal dance between desert and stream, one name was murmured with devotion and longing alike. Anahita, the immaculate goddess of waters, she who gives and takes, she who blesses and tempts. The ancients called her Ardvisura Anahita, the strong, the pure, the undefiled. Yet her essence was never confined to a single shape or virtue. To those who built her temples beside rivers and springs, she was the mother of fertility, the keeper of love's first sigh. To warriors, she was strength flowing like a river before battle. To poets, she was the rhythm of life itself, the pulse that moved through earth, heart, and heaven. In the heart of the empire, where kings wove alliances with blood and gods, Anahita remained untouched by mortal politics. She belonged to all, yet to none. From the mountain springs of Elbrus to the far reaches of the Tigris, her temples stood like jeweled mirrors to the heavens. Pilgrims traveled through scorching winds to kneel at her waters, seeking blessings for harvest, for love, for children, for forgiveness. And though they prayed for her purity, they feared the wildness that stirred beneath it. For every river that nourished could also flood and destroy, and every blessing carried the echo of temptation.
There are stories, old, half-whispered, that speak of nights when the goddess would descend from her celestial river, her luminous veil of mist trailing behind her, her bare feet kissing the surface of mortal waters. Those who saw her claimed she shimmered like moonlight reflected upon an unseen sea, her presence both tender and unbearable. The air around her trembled with life and longing. To gaze upon her was to remember every unspoken yearning, every forbidden touch, every moment where love and ruin met. She was purity, yet her purity was not absence of desire, but its transformation. Anahita was the sacred paradox, the water that cleanses and consumes. The priests who chanted her hymns feared this truth, though they could never deny it. They spoke of her as the chaste mother of fertility, but the poets knew better. They wrote of her as the beloved of heaven, whose tears fell for both gods and men. In their verses, her laughter was the sound of rain over bronze rooftops, her sigh the tide that bends reeds along the riverbanks. When storms came, the Persians would say she was angry, or perhaps only restless. Lightning flashed like her bracelets of gold. Thunder echoed her voice as she called to the rivers below. They imagined her seated upon a throne of flowing water, her robes woven from mist and moonbeams, her hands cupping the fate of mortals as one might hold a fragile flame. She watched the deserts crack under the sun, and when her heart softened, she let her tears fall, gentle, life-giving rain, until the earth sighed in relief. In the silence between storms, she was gentleness itself. Lovers met by her rivers at dusk, believing that her presence sanctified their union. Mothers sang her name over newborns, wishing her protection upon their fragile breaths. And when the sick were brought to her waters, the priests whispered that she listened, not with ears, but with the current that flowed through all living things. But even in reverence there lingered fear, for Anahita's gift was not one easily controlled. A mortal might beg for her love and drown in its depth. A heart might seek her purity only to confront its own shadow. For what is purity if not awareness of what lies beyond it? The waters she governed could cleanse a soul or reflect back its hidden desires. In the myths sung by the Magi under starlit skies, it is said that once, before the birth of time, Anahita fell in love with light itself, with Mithra, the radiant guardian of truth. Their union painted the dawn and dusk across the sky. Their separation gave rise to longing that would never fade. It was this divine yearning that shaped the river's endless motion, forever seeking the sea, forever unable to rest. Through that yearning, Anahita's waters learned to love. Through that love, they learned to destroy.
And thus, every river in Persia became a reminder of her duality, tranquil on the surface, but filled with secrets below. Children were warned not to play too close to her waters after sunset, for Anahita listened in the quiet, and sometimes the goddess desired company. The wind that caressed the reeds carried her laughter, soft and haunting, like a promise and a warning entwined. The stars reflected in her waters each night, as if heaven itself bowed to her beauty. And in those reflections one could almost see the outlines of her face, distant yet near, tender yet unyielding. The priests, ever cautious, forbade the people from gazing too long into the temple pools, for they believed the goddess might draw the soul inward, into the depths where no breath could follow. Still lovers came at midnight, kneeling by the water, whispering wishes into the ripples, hoping that the goddess of love and purity would hear and answer, perhaps with mercy, perhaps with passion. To know Anahita was to stand between thirst and flood, between reverence and desire. She was the pulse in the veins of the earth, the shimmer in the eyes of those who dared to dream of divine affection. Her waters did not discriminate. They nourished the fields of kings and the hands of beggars alike. Yet no one could truly claim her, for she was as fluid as the current she commanded. As centuries passed, empires rose and fell, and the rivers carried their dust away. Still her presence endured. In every spring that broke free from stone, in every whisper of rain over parched land, Anahita's voice could be heard. Some said she had withdrawn to the celestial waters, watching humankind from afar. Others believed she still walked among them, disguised as the ripple upon a river's skin. And so the myth lived, not as a memory, but as a current within the soul. For the people of Persia understood that to worship Anahita was to accept contradiction, to seek purity while surrendering to desire, to love without possession, to find serenity in longing. She was the goddess of waters, yes, but also of the emotions that flow within us, untamed and luminous.
Even now, when rain falls softly on the desert and the scent of earth rises to meet it, her name stirs in the wind. Perhaps she still listens. Perhaps she still weeps. Or perhaps, in the secret heart of every drop, she still remembers love. Tell me, when you drink from the river, do you feel her gaze upon you? When the first rain touches your lips, do you taste devotion or temptation? And when the water flows through your fingers, slipping away before you can hold it, do you too long for the goddess who is both purity and desire? For Anahita waits, as she always has, at the edge of every thirst, smiling softly, as if she knows what you seek before you dare to ask.
In the cool embrace of twilight, when the last rays of sun slipped beneath the Persian horizon, the temple of Anahita glowed as if holding the memory of day within its stone heart. The sacred pools mirrored a sky painted with indigo and rose, and the fragrance of incense hung in the air like a sigh too gentle to fade. Within this sanctum of flowing light and shadow, Anahita moved, not walking, but gliding, her steps leaving ripples where none should be. Her presence was not seen before it was felt, like the first drop of rain before a storm, like a heartbeat sensed through silence. Her veil was woven from mist, and through it her eyes gleamed, twin reflections of moonlit water, calm and endless. To look upon them was to see not only what one desired, but what one feared. For within her gaze dwelt both promise and consequence, love and undoing. She was a paradox wrapped in grace, the mother who nurtures life and the untamed force that claims it back. The priests who served her spoke her name with reverence and distance, as if any intimacy might shatter the delicate boundary between mortal and divine. Yet, one among them, a young high priest named Ardashir, had begun to forget that distance. Ardashir was unlike the others. His devotion was not born of duty alone, but of a quiet, unspoken longing. Since his childhood, he had served the goddess's temple, reciting hymns beside the sacred basin, pouring libations, tending to the flame that never died. But as the years passed, his prayers grew softer, less ritual, and more confession. When he gazed upon her carved likeness, it was not worship he felt, but ache, an ache that had no words. He wondered if it was blasphemy to love the divine, or if love itself was the purest form of worship. He had never seen her in full form, not until that twilight. The priests spoke of her manifestations, the rustle of wind, the shimmer upon water. But that evening, as the temple emptied and night's first stars began to appear, the air thickened with the scent of rain. The torches flickered, and in their trembling light she appeared before him, her presence both silent and overwhelming. Water glimmered beneath her feet, her hair flowing like an endless river down her back. Ardashir fell to his knees, breathless. "Rise," said the goddess, her voice the sound of flowing water over smooth stones, gentle, continuous, impossible to resist. He obeyed, though every instinct urged him to stay bowed. Her gaze met his, and in that instant something ancient stirred between them, something that was not meant for words. She studied him with the patience of one who has watched countless souls live and fade, and yet there was curiosity in her eyes. A mortal had called her countless times, prayed for blessings, begged for rain, but rarely had one called with such quiet yearning, such raw devotion. She could feel it, the pulse of his heart quickening like the rush of spring waters freed from ice. His devotion warmed her, though she could not admit it, for she was Anahita, pure, eternal, and bound by the rhythm of the divine.
"Why do you tremble, child of dust?" she asked. Her tone serene, yet her words lingered like the caress of cool rain upon fevered skin. He said, "Because you are before me, and I cannot bear it." A faint smile touched her lips, a smile both tender and sorrowful. "You bear life itself, priest. You carry thirst, and you call it faith." Her words flowed through him, striking deep. He wanted to answer, to tell her of the dreams that haunted him, dreams where he stood at the edge of a river, reaching for a reflection that dissolved each time his fingers touched the surface. Dreams where the sound of her voice guided him through the dark. But how could he speak of desire before the goddess of purity? His lips parted, but no words came. Only the sound of water filled the silence, as if the temple itself listened. Anahita stepped closer. The air cooled around her, scented with lilies and rain. The silver bangles at her wrists chimed softly, like droplets falling into a still pool. She reached out her hand, and though she did not touch him, he felt the nearness of her divinity, a warmth and a chill at once, awakening every sense. "Do you serve me out of love?" she asked, her voice quiet now, like a current beneath calm waters. He swallowed hard. "I serve you because I cannot do otherwise." Her eyes searched him, and for the briefest moment, something unguarded flickered within them. For though she was eternal, untouched by mortal decay, she was not immune to the echo of feeling. To be worshipped was to be distant. To be loved was to be seen. And in Ardshir's gaze, she was seen not as goddess, but as being, radiant and alive, yet fragile in the face of emotion. But such recognition was dangerous, for gods who felt too deeply risked unraveling their own divinity. She turned away, and as she did, the light shifted, her form seeming to dissolve into a mist of silver droplets. The temple sighed, as if relieved and sorrowful at once. Ardashir fell to his knees again, whispering her name, his voice breaking with awe. "Anahita." Her laughter answered him, soft, distant, yet carrying the warmth of rain upon dry soil. "You call me as if I were yours," she murmured, her voice carried by the rippling water. "But no river belongs to its banks." Then she was gone, leaving only the faint shimmer of her presence upon the pool's surface. Yet Ardashir knew that she had not entirely left. The air still pulsed with her memory, the way water retains the heat of the sun long after sunset. From that night onward, his prayers changed. The hymns he once recited by rote now trembled with emotion. His hands shook when he poured water upon the altar, as though he feared to spill her essence. The other priests noticed and whispered. They said he had seen her, and those who see the goddess too closely often lose themselves. But Anahita, in her celestial abode, could not entirely forget him either. Within her, a strange warmth lingered, unfamiliar and disquieting. She had looked upon countless mortals, felt their devotion wash over her like tides, but this one had stirred something deeper. His eyes, so full of longing, yet bound by reverence, had mirrored the ancient struggle within her, the desire to love and the duty to remain pure. At times she would descend unseen, watching him from the veil of mist that gathered over the temple pools. He would stand beneath the moonlight, his hands immersed in water, whispering prayers not to be heard but to be felt. And as she watched him, her heart, if a goddess could call it that, would tighten, like a river restrained by its own banks. The world around them carried on. Rivers flowed, rains came and went. Yet within that temple, a quiet current of emotion deepened. She was the goddess of purity, and he the mortal who dared to love the pure. Between them flowed a silence more powerful than any prayer, a tension woven of restraint and desire. When she appeared again, as mist, as moonlight, as the scent of rain, neither spoke of devotion nor of love. They simply stood within each other's presence, suspended between sacredness and sin. He dared to lift his gaze. She did not turn away. In that shared stillness, the world seemed to hold its breath. The pool at their feet shimmered, reflecting not two figures but one, divine and human, heaven and earth, purity and longing entwined in mirrored light. And though no words passed between them, both knew that something had begun, a ripple upon still waters, soft yet unstoppable, something that would soon demand to be felt, to be faced, to be fulfilled. For even the goddess of rivers cannot forever deny the pull of her own current.
The nights that followed were heavy with silence, yet beneath that stillness a hidden current stirred. Ardashir moved through his sacred duties as he always had, lighting lamps, tending altars, reciting the ancient verses, but within him, devotion had ripened into something perilous. The memory of her voice lingered in his thoughts like the echo of water against stone. Her absence filled the air more deeply than her presence ever had. Each night he waited beside the sacred pool, praying not for rain, not for blessing, but for her return. And she did return, not as a vision of mist this time, but as herself. The moon hung high above the temple, full and luminous, spilling its silver over marble and water. The river outside murmured as if whispering warnings to the sand, but Ardashir heard none of them. When the air shifted, when the scent of lilies and thunder filled the room, he turned, and there she was, her figure woven from moonlight and shadow. Anahita, he breathed, the word a prayer and a sin in one. Her gaze was unreadable, the surface of a still lake hiding unknown depths. She said, "You call my name as though you have a right to it." She stepped closer. Her voice was calm, but beneath its serenity flowed something darker, a note of tremor, of emotion suppressed. "Do you know what you invite when you speak it so?" He did not answer. Words had grown useless before her. Only his heart spoke, pounding wildly, echoing the pulse of rivers after the rain. She stopped within reach. Her presence shimmered with power, her aura wrapping him like the humid breath of a storm. And yet within that divine radiance, there was loneliness. The still ache of an eternity spent untouched. He saw it in her eyes, in the delicate curve of her lips when she spoke again. You think you love me, but you love the reflection that water makes of light. Then let me drown in that reflection, he said, his voice trembling. Let me know it once before I fade. For a moment, something human flickered within her divine composure. The river goddess looked at him as though she had never seen a mortal before, not as a worshipper, not as a fleeting spark of dust, but as something that defied her own stillness. Her fingers, pale as moonlit foam, rose unconsciously, tracing the air between them. You would drown, she said softly. My waters cleanse, they do not return what they take. Then take me, he whispered. Let my devotion be your flood.
The words fell like a stone into still water, rippling through her restraint. For centuries, she had been the keeper of purity, the vessel of order amid chaos, her essence bound by divine decree. But in his voice, she heard something ancient, something that resonated with the primal rhythm she herself was made of. For what was water, if not desire unending? It flowed, it sought, it consumed, and in its embrace all boundaries dissolved. Her breath quickened, though she did not need to breathe. You do not know what you ask. I know only that I can no longer pray without longing, he said. Every word I speak to you burns upon my tongue. Every drop I pour feels stolen from your veins. A silence settled between them, fragile, luminous, unbearable. The temple around them seemed to fade, leaving only moonlight and the low murmur of water. Anahita looked away, but her own reflection in the pool betrayed her turmoil. The goddess who had blessed rivers and calmed seas now found herself adrift, caught in a current she could not command. You are mortal, she said at last. You will fade as rivers dry and clouds pass. I am not meant to love the fleeting. And yet, he murmured, stepping closer, you love the world that fades. You feed it, you heal it, you bless it, again and again. If impermanence is your sorrow, then perhaps it is also your desire. His words pierced her like sunlight breaking through water. She turned her gaze to him, and for the first time she did not see worship. She saw truth. He was right. Her eternity was not absence of feeling, but the endless repetition of it. She was condemned to nurture what would always die, to love what could never stay. Perhaps that was why his longing felt like relief, because it mirrored her own. Anahita stepped forward until the space between them vanished. Her scent, rain and rose, salt and wind, surrounded him. He could feel her presence like the tide's pull against his chest, both gentle and absolute.
"You do not want what you ask," she whispered. "Then let me burn," he answered. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Time, sound, air. Then, as if the heavens themselves had exhaled, she reached out and touched him. Her fingers brushed his cheek, cool as water, yet electric as thunder. The contact shattered every barrier between devotion and desire. His breath caught, her light trembled. The pool at their feet rippled violently, spilling over its edge. Anahita closed her eyes. "You cannot love me," she said, her voice breaking into a whisper. "I already do," he confessed. "And that is my peace."
His honesty undid her. For an instant, her divine composure faltered, and in its place stood a woman, ancient, luminous, longing. The force that had birthed rivers now trembled in her veins. She drew him close, not out of mercy, but surrender. When her lips met his, the world changed. The torches extinguished, the pool overflowed, thunder murmured in the distance. Their kiss was not of mortal passion, but of elements colliding, fire meeting rain, air trembling with the weight of water. In his arms she felt life's fragility. In hers he tasted eternity. The very air thickened with the scent of storm. Her hands, though divine, trembled as they traced the line of his jaw, as though discovering what flesh felt like after eons of untouching. But even as she yielded, tears formed in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of recognition that love was never without loss. The rivers beyond the temple began to rise, their water surging as if echoing her heart's chaos. She pulled away, her expression torn between ecstasy and dread. "What have you done?" she whispered. "What we both desired," he answered, his voice trembling. Her tears fell into the water, and the temple shook. The river outside roared, its waves crashing against the banks. She felt the weight of her divinity returning, the realization that the purity she embodied had been altered, not broken, but transformed. The love of a mortal had touched the eternal, and now both could never return to what they were. She stepped back, her form flickering between light and shadow. "You have called the flood, Ardashir," she said, her tone soft, almost tender. "It will wash away all that stands between us, even you." He did not flinch. "Then let it come," he said, "for what is faith if not surrender?" The wind howled through the temple, extinguishing the last flame. Water poured across the marble floor, shimmering under the moonlight. Anahita's figure began to fade into the mist once more, her eyes full of both love and warning. In that final instant before she vanished, she whispered, "You have awakened what should never have been stirred, and now neither the river nor I will ever rest again." When she was gone, the flood began, gentle at first, then relentless. The waters rose, carrying away the offerings, the idols, even the sacred fire. Ardashir stood amid the current, unafraid. He closed his eyes, feeling her presence in every drop that touched his skin, knowing that love, divine or mortal, was never meant to remain still. And thus the goddess of purity learned the taste of desire.
The river that once ran calm began to roar, and the night that once guarded silence learned to sing. The world would never forget the moment when devotion turned to passion, and water itself remembered what it was to burn.
The flood did not stop with the dawn. For 3 days and nights the waters poured from the mountains as though the heavens themselves had opened their veins. The rivers swelled, the fields disappeared beneath their glassy surface, and the temples of men were swallowed whole. Yet within that chaos there was a strange, shimmering order, a rhythm that pulsed in harmony with the heart of one who had once been a goddess, untouched by passion. Anahita, now both creator and destroyer, felt herself carried by the very current she once commanded. She drifted through her own waters, no longer radiant and serene, but trembling, luminous with something she could neither bless nor banish. Within her, 2 voices warred. One, the divine whisper of purity that shaped worlds. The other, the fragile human ache that whispered the name Ardashir with every tide. Her realm had always been balance between drought and flood, devotion and longing, but now that balance had broken, and from its fragments rose something unbearably beautiful. Far below, the temple lay half-drowned. The marble pillars gleamed like bones beneath the water, and in that submerged sanctum stood Ardashir, alive, though barely. The flood had taken all but him. He had remained, clinging to faith, even as the world dissolved. When the waters rose to his chest, he did not struggle. When they reached his lips, he whispered her name, not in prayer, but in love. And she heard him. The river stilled. The moon, pale and weary, hung above the horizon like a half-closed eye. The waters shimmered, parting around the temple ruins as Anahita emerged once more, radiant, sorrowful, magnificent. Her body was woven from light and mist. Her eyes glowed with the reflection of 1,000 tears. The flood bowed before her, trembling like a lover awaiting touch. "Do you not flee, mortal?" she asked, though her voice quivered. "Do you not see that I am the end of what you love?" He smiled faintly, exhaustion softening his features. "You are what I love." She stepped closer, the waters swirling around her as though caressing their maker. When she reached him, her hand rose to his cheek, and this time she did not hesitate. Her touch was no longer cold. It was alive, tender, trembling. He felt her pulse beneath her skin, a rhythm ancient and new, the heartbeat of rain before it falls.
"I cannot return to what I was," she whispered. "You have changed the flow of my eternity." "Then let eternity change," he murmured. At his words, something within her broke, or perhaps something long bound was finally released. The world around them fell silent. The flood, the storm, even the wind seemed to pause as the divine and the mortal stood on the edge of the impossible. Their gazes locked, and for a breathless instant, everything else ceased to exist. Anahita drew him closer, their bodies reflected in the water's surface like twin flames trembling within the same wave. The distance between them dissolved, not as sin, but as surrender. The moment was sacred, a merging not of flesh, but of essence.
The water rose and spiraled around them, glowing faintly, as if bearing witness to the union of devotion and desire. When their lips met again, it was not the wildness of storm, but the serenity of rain returning to the sea. Her divinity flowed into him, warmth flooding through his veins, and his mortal heart offered in return the one thing she had never known, the beauty of impermanence. For in his fleeting life, love was not an eternity to endure, but a miracle to feel before it faded. The floodlight from the moon danced across their joined hands. Around them every droplet shimmered, alive with feeling, each one a fragment of longing, of forgiveness, of everything unsaid between heaven and earth. Her tears mingled with the river's current, and as they fell, lilies bloomed where they touched the surface, luminous and trembling. "Do you see?" she breathed against his skin. "Even my sorrow creates life." He brushed his fingers against her jaw, reverent. "Then let me be the sorrow you create." Her laughter, soft and breaking, filled the air like music. "You are not sorrow, Ardashir. You are the thirst that makes the river flow." Their embrace deepened, and yet there was no hunger in it, only knowing. His breath caught against her neck, and she felt his heartbeat, fragile and unyielding. In that fragile rhythm, she recognized something eternal. It was then she understood the secret her own waters had whispered for ages. Purity was not the absence of desire, but the grace to feel it without drowning. But the world could not hold such union for long. The divine and the mortal could not remain entwined without consequence. The current began to tremble beneath them. The water, heavy with energy, shimmered as though straining against the laws of existence. The river's voice grew louder, echoing her name, her sorrow, her awakening.
Anahita clung to him, her expression fierce with love and pain. "If I remain, you will die," she said, her voice breaking. "Then let me die in your arms," he replied, calm, as if he had always known this would be the end. Her tears fell faster now. "You do not understand. You are already becoming part of me." He smiled faintly. "Then let me be your river." The words pierced her heart like light through crystal. She felt the current shift within her, the divine rhythm folding around mortal heartbeat. The purity she once embodied reshaped into something deeper, fuller. Her power swelled, but so did her grief. She knew that every moment she held him, she pulled him farther from the world of men. His breath began to falter, his eyes softening as if he were falling asleep. "No," she whispered, holding his face in both hands, "not yet." The water rose higher, embracing them both. Its glow intensified, wrapping them in waves of silver light. For one final moment, they existed as one, divine and mortal, giver and seeker, water and thirst, until there was no boundary between them. The sound of their hearts merged with the current, echoing through the flooded land like the hymn of a new creation. Then, silence. When the waters calmed, the temple was gone. The flood receded as gently as it had come, leaving behind a river that shone with impossible clarity. The fields bloomed again, greener than before, nourished by tears both human and divine.
The people who survived spoke of a voice in the waters that night, a voice that sang with love and sorrow intertwined. Anahita stood once more at the river's edge, the dawn reflecting in her eyes. Her divinity had changed. Her purity, once untouched, now carried the mark of tenderness. The air around her shimmered, and in that soft glow her reflection wavered, not alone now, but joined by another's. She reached toward the water, and though her fingers passed through the surface, she could still feel him, not in form, but in flow. He was there, in every current, in every drop that fell from cloud to earth. His mortal body was gone, yet his essence lived within her, inseparable from the rivers themselves. Anahita closed her eyes. The wind touched her face like a lover's final breath, and she smiled, a smile that carried both ache and peace. I am not pure, but I am whole. And from that day onward, it was said that the rivers of Persia carried not only her blessings, but her longing. A love too vast for the gods, too deep for men, flowing endlessly toward the sea.
When the storm faded into memory and the flood gave way to quiet ripples, Persia awakened beneath a new sky. The rivers, once swollen with fury, now flowed clear and calm, their waters carrying a glimmer that had not existed before, a pale luminescence like moonlight dissolved into current. The land was changed, though no one could yet say whether it was blessed or cursed. Villages rebuilt themselves along the softened banks, and the people whispered her name in both fear and reverence. Anahita. They remembered the night the waters had risen, when the goddess had wept, and the tears of heaven had swallowed the earth. But they also remembered how those same waters had receded, leaving fields fertile beyond imagining. What had been devastation now pulsed with life. Crops thrived, springs burst from the desert floor, and newborn children were said to open their eyes, already glistening with the reflection of the river. The people called it a miracle, a mercy. But for Anahita, it was the beginning of exile. She stood upon the high cliffs of Mount Zagros, where the first light of dawn touched the snow peaks. From there, she could see her rivers winding through the plains like silver veins. Each shimmer of light upon the water felt like a heartbeat, his heartbeat, flowing endlessly through the world she once ruled with detachment. Her temples had not changed in stone, but their prayers had. The chants that rose from mortal lips were no longer purely hymns of devotion. They were songs of yearning, of love lost and found within the same breath. Anahita listened, her hands clasped before her, and wondered if she had done right. Her love gave life, but it also broke in the veil that kept divine and mortal apart. She had crossed the boundary, and in doing so, she had left a mark that could never fade. Each drop of water that now fell not only carried purity, but memory, the tender ache of longing, the sacred echo of touch. The gods above murmured disapproval. From the celestial plateau, they watched her rivers glittering with mortal warmth, and they whispered of impurity, of folly. Yet none could deny the beauty her defiance had birthed. Even the cold winds that once served the higher deities softened when they passed through her valleys, as though reluctant to disturb her grief. Anahita knelt beside a small spring that emerged from the mountain's heart, one she had not created but now found. It was young, trembling, its waters shy and uncertain. When she touched its surface, it stilled beneath her fingers, recognizing her. She smiled faintly.
"You are him," she murmured to the stream. "You are the breath he gave me when he spoke of love. You will travel far, little one. You will touch every soul that dares to dream." And so she blessed it, though her blessing was not of command, but of remembrance. Wherever her waters flowed, whether through fields or through the tears of those who prayed to her, they carried that echo: love that defies the heavens, and sorrow that sanctifies the earth. In the villages below, generations passed, yet her presence lingered. Women drew water from the wells and swore they could feel warmth beneath the chill, as if someone were breathing with them. Lovers met by moonlit rivers, whispering promises that rippled across the surface. Even in drought, when the rivers shrank to narrow ribbons of light, people knelt by their edges and said, "She still waits." For they believed that the goddess who loved a mortal would never truly abandon the living. But Anahita had changed more deeply than mortals could imagine. Her beauty had softened, touched by something mortal, the faint weariness of knowing loss. Where once her robes shimmered like untouched snow, now they bore the faint tint of earth. Her voice, when it rose with the tide, carried the music of longing instead of command. She had not lost her divinity, but she had gained something older and more fragile: empathy. Each night she walked the banks of her rivers unseen. Where she stepped, reeds swayed and dew gathered in her footprints. Sometimes she would pause and whisper into the current, "Are you there?" The water would glimmer in response, 1,000 reflections flickering like tiny stars, and she would close her eyes. In that flicker, she felt him, not as a body, but as rhythm, as endless motion. Her love had not been in vain, though its price was eternal solitude. For every cycle of the river reminded her of what she had lost and what she had created. The water's flow became the language of her heart, its rise and fall, the inhalation and exhalation of divine sorrow turned to life. She came to understand that her grief was not a wound, but a current, forever moving, forever giving. As centuries turned, the myth of Anahita transformed. Some said she had wept until the seas were full. Others said she had turned her lover into a star, hidden beneath the surface of her waters, so that the moon could see him each night. Poets wrote that when it rains, she is remembering. Each drop a kiss falling from heaven to earth. And when the rivers retreat into silence, she is breathing, gathering strength to love the world again.
Even the other gods, once cold in judgment, began to whisper differently of her. They saw how her waters nourished not only soil, but soul. How mortals prayed to her not in fear, but in tenderness. And though they never spoke it aloud, they began to send their own offerings down to her rivers. Small tokens of acknowledgement, petals and incense carried by the current. The goddess who had once stood above desire had become its most sacred guardian.
not desire as hunger, but as the pulse that reminds creation it is alive. Through her the world learned that divinity need not be untouched to be holy. In her reflection, love and purity no longer opposed each other. They danced. As the ages waned and new empires rose upon the same fertile plains, Anahita's temples aged into ruins. Yet even in crumbling stone, her image endured, carved in the likeness of a woman holding a vase from which water forever flowed. Travelers still paused before those relics, and though they no longer knew her name, they poured wine into the earth and whispered wishes into the breeze. The soil would drink, and somewhere far beneath, the rivers would stir. At the heart of it all, Anahita remained, part goddess, part memory. She was the scent of rain before it falls, the hush that precedes dawn, the shimmer on a lover's tears. Her story became the river's own, to give, to take, to return. And sometimes when the moon rests low and the world sleeps, her silhouette still appears upon the water, radiant, unbound, smiling faintly as though recalling the taste of love's first rain. Those who are awake enough to see her say that she moves like the tide itself, not away from sorrow, but through it. For she knows now that every ending is only the river turning, finding its way back to the sea. In the quiet of eternity, her voice lingers over the current, soft, eternal, filled with the calm of one who has finally understood. Nothing pure is ever lost. It only changes form. And with that whisper, the rivers sigh and continue their endless song, a hymn of renewal, of tenderness, of divine love reborn with every drop that falls from the heavens to the waiting earth.
The story of Anahita does not end in the quiet stillness of her rivers, nor in the ruins of her temples. It endures in something far more subtle, in the pulse of the world itself. Every drop that falls from the sky carries her echo. Every wave that kisses the shore whispers her name. For the goddess who once stood untouched above desire has become something more eternal than purity. She has become the rhythm of love itself, that strange sacred force which both creates and destroys, cleanses and consumes. There is a tenderness in this transformation, a kind of divine humility. Once, Anahita reigned over the waters as their keeper, aloof and radiant, her beauty belonging to the heavens. Now she moves within the waters, inseparable from their song. The goddess who commanded rivers has become them, no longer a sovereign presence above the world, but its breath, its heartbeat, its longing. Her divinity is no longer defined by distance, but by immersion. She flows through the veins of the earth and through the veins of every living thing. In her story lies the reflection of our own hearts. We too are beings of dual nature, capable of purity and of passion, of restraint and surrender. We, like her, are forever called to the edge of what we should not touch, and yet it is there that we find what makes us human.
Anahita's descent into love, her surrender to emotion, is not a fall from grace, but an awakening. Through her, we learn that the divine exists not in untouched perfection, but in the courage to feel deeply, even when it wounds us. The Persians once said that the rivers are veins of the world's soul, that when they run dry, it is because the gods have grown silent. But Anahita ensures that silence never lasts long. Her voice is the whisper of rain against windows, the hush of springs bubbling beneath the soil, the sigh that escapes between two lovers before the dawn. She speaks in sensations rather than words. To hear her is to feel, and to feel is to remember that love, however fleeting, is what binds us to creation. Her myth then becomes a mirror. When we look into her waters, we see not only the goddess, but ourselves, reflected, fragmented, shimmering between purity and desire. We see the moments when love made us tremble, when loss carved wisdom into our hearts, when devotion blurred into longing. In her reflection, we recognize that love's beauty lies not in its permanence, but in its motion. Like a river, it carries us forward as it erodes us, reshaping our edges into something softer, wiser, more compassionate.
Anahita's tears once drowned the earth, yet from that flood life blossomed. So too in our hearts, what feels like ruin may be rebirth, what feels like loss may be the beginning of renewal. Her story teaches that creation and destruction are not opposites. They are the same current seen from different shores. The water that takes away also gives back. The storm that breaks also cleanses. Love that wounds also awakens. There is a quiet kind of holiness in this truth. It is not the holiness of untouched divinity, but of experience, the holiness of a heart that has known joy and sorrow and still dares to open again. Anahita's purity did not vanish when she loved, it transformed. It became the purity of emotion laid bare, of vulnerability made sacred. And in that transformation, she became more than a goddess. She became a symbol of what it means to be alive. Now, when the moon hangs low over the deserts of Persia, her reflection still trembles on the rivers. Travelers pause to drink, and though they may not know her name, they feel something stir within them, a tenderness, a calm, a memory that feels older than their bones. They touch the water and sense her presence, unseen but infinite, as if her fingers brushed theirs through the veil of eternity. In that brief contact, something passes between them, a wordless understanding that love and loss are but different faces of the same divine force. Perhaps that is Anahita's final gift, not her rivers, not her beauty, but the quiet wisdom she left behind, that to love deeply is to accept impermanence, to give knowing it may be lost, to surrender without certainty of return. The water flows because it must. It cannot hold itself still without ceasing to be. So too the heart. It must flow, it must risk, it must break, and in breaking, it must find its way to begin again. Anahita watches over this endless cycle, neither queen nor exile now, but essence. She no longer seeks her lost lover,
for she understands that he is everywhere, in the clouds that gather, in the rivers that carve valleys, in the mist that drapes the dawn. In loving him, she loved creation itself, and in losing him, she became eternal.
So, when the first rain falls after a long silence, pause for a moment. Listen. The drops that touch your skin are her voice, cool, soft, forgiving. They carry stories older than memory, older than belief. Within each one is her promise that nothing truly loved can ever vanish, that all returns transformed like water finding its way home. And when the rain stops, when the sky clears and the world exhales, there will be a hush, a sacred stillness. In that stillness, if you listen closely, you may hear the faint murmur of her laughter, distant yet near, moving through the rivers, the roots, the rhythm of your own pulse. It will sound like the gentlest truth, that the divine and the human are not apart, that purity is not absence of desire, but the grace that follows it, that love in all its forms is the eternal tide that shapes the soul. Anahita remains, unseen, unfelt, yet ever present, in the shimmer of the water, in the tears we shed, in the quiet moments when the heart dares to feel again. She is the river that never ends, the breath between longing and peace, the goddess who once wept for love and became the love that sustains the world. And as the river moves on, carrying moonlight and memory alike, her whisper drifts upon its surface, soft as mist, eternal as the sea. I am not gone. I am every drop that touches you, every flow that moves through you, every feeling that refuses to fade. Then silence, vast, sacred, and alive. The stillness after the storm, the moment when water, sky, and soul become one.